It's me, Kevin, CEO of HouseHack and Data7. The Federal Reserve, specifically Mr. Hawker at the Federal Reserve, just dismissed the warmer January higher inflation readings. And in this video, I want to explain what this potentially means as a bit of a shift. First, yesterday, just to catch you up, yesterday in my Meet Kevin report, I briefly talked about how the Federal Reserve has sort of removed forward guidance. This was odd because typically the Federal Reserve appreciates and enjoys and reiterates that their job is to provide everybody expectations of what's going to come in the future. They did this as rates were going up in 2018. Then when they paused rate increases, they did this as we were going through COVID, through the stimulative programs that obviously they helped to fund for the government. They were the money printers after all. They provided forward guidance when they said that they thought inflation would be transitory. They provided forward guidance in how high they would likely end up going with rates, rate increases, and how we would end up staying higher for longer before cutting rates. And when we began the rate cut cycle, we actually saw a 50 basis point cut. Just in September of 2024 here, just a few months ago, under the basis that the labor market was weakening and that the Federal Reserve was guiding that if the labor market continued to deteriorate, we could continue to see larger cuts. Now, what's fascinating is, and this is just the catch-up part, what's fascinating is the Federal Reserve has suggested, hey, okay, so we've done what we're willing to do. We used to give you forward guidance. Right now, we're just going to hang out. Now, this may be because of the turbulence of Trump policy. See, for the first 2 months after Trump was elected, we heard Federal Reserve officials say, we're not going to provide any opinion on tariffs. Once we see what the tariffs are, at that point, we will react. Okay, so the forward guidance at that point was we're just not going to do anything. Then on December 18th, they told us, and this, by the way, hit the stock market, at least temporarily. A lot of funds started selling after this, and you could see a noticeable drop, at least, again, temporarily here. December 18th, the Federal Reserve suggests, we see this tariff policy as potentially inflationary, and we're going to act in anticipation of that. And this was seen as a big flip-flop from the Federal Reserve because they had gone from, we're going to give you forward guidance for years, to we're not going to respond to tariff policy until it takes effect, which is fine. That's a form of forward guidance. Then flip-flopping to, we are now going to give you guidance on tariffs, to then walking that back in January and unflipping. So they just in the last meeting, unflipping back to, no. We were going to incorporate future tariff policy uncertainties, and now we're not going to again. We're just going to stay higher for longer. But something else has changed. The Federal Reserve has basically given us no clues in terms of when they're going to cut again. They essentially just say, we're just going to be data dependent at this point. So it feels like the Federal Reserve is sort of just leaning back in their chair saying, hey, you know what? We're just going to wait and see what happens at this point because we have no idea. We have no idea what the impact of hundreds of thousands of bureaucrats losing their jobs in Washington, D.C. or around the country, working for the federal government, including, states like California, which employ a lot of federal government workers. We have no idea what that is going to do. So we'll wait and see. We have no idea what reciprocal tariffs are going to look like. Donald Trump did just announce these and suggested that Lutnick was basically going to go country by country. But the idea that value-added taxes in Europe are going to be considered a form of a tariff that we now have to reciprocally match is somewhat unclear, because how are we going to pull that off? So you have a sales tax on Apple laptops. Our sales taxes in the United States say average 7%. Yours is 17%. So I guess we have to now reciprocally tax your computers by 10%. Wait, what computers am I buying from France again? Anyway, so then there's this idea that these tariffs are going to come from the angle of, okay, well, maybe they won't just be monetary tariffs like that, Kevin. Maybe they'll also be, requirements of like car testing. This is like automotive regulation. This is interesting. Okay. So in other words, nobody has any flying F as to what is going to happen with, Lutnick's suggestions, Commerce Secretary, to Donald Trump and to the Treasury Secretary on how to actually implement these tariffs. So the Federal Reserve has really flipped into this backseat of, yeah, we just don't know, so we're just not going to give you guidance. Now, the one guidance that they gave us just now, just with Hawker's announcement here, is that the January CPI numbers, they threw cold water on them. Yes, they were a little bit warmer, and markets were unhappy about that. PCI numbers were a little better. Sorry, the PPI numbers were a little bit better the next day. PCI numbers. What am I talking about? Installing another graphic card into a computer? That's a pain in the butt, okay? I shattered the darn glass on the front of the computer accidentally. I've taken that glass off and on like 17 times. But the problem is I zip tied all of the cables to really clean it up and make it look nice. But that meant I had to crawl under a table to reinstall the glass. So I'm putting the glass in crooked, and let's just say my family had a little education in what tempered glass means. It explodes. Anyway, so got to keep that away from the babies. Anyway, this interesting piece here from the Doomberg is that Hawker greeted with skepticism the data showing that the consumer price index rose in January by the most since August of 2023. With a broad range of increases. I mean, let's not even get started talking about groceries or gas prices, and then of course what we're seeing with insurance rates. Insurance rates are mind blowing, but then their costs have gone up a lot as well. And I'm not here to shill for the insurance companies. I have nothing. I benefit from lower insurance prices. That's all I know. But in the last decade, CPI inflation in January has surprised on the upside 9 out of 10 times, Hawker said. My conjecture is that seasonal adjustments are struggling to keep up with a fast-changing economy, and we need to parse the underlying trends from the month-to-month noise. The Philadelphia Fed chief said he fully supported the decision to leave rates stable last month, and he said that rates are at a good level to bring back inflation to the Fed's 2% goal in the next 2 years if the economy evolves as he anticipates. So now this is interesting because the Federal Reserve is basically taking this POV of like, hey, we're taking a backseat. We don't know how long higher for longer is going to be, and we're not going to provide forward guidance. That's basically what we've gotten in the last meetings. But today, we get some detail from Hawker where he actually says, that high inflation in January is transitory. And by the way, it might take us 2 years to get back to 2%. So see you in 2 years. Peace. Okay. Wow. Yeah, that would take quite a while. That would not be as ideal as what a lot of folks are hoping for, mostly because it then just takes that much longer for housing to become affordable for people to start buying again. Now, personally, I believe, from a house hack point of view, that as a real estate investor, if you can buy in high quality areas now, there is a benefit to that because you do have lower competition and you are starting to see supply ramp up. Now, this is typical. Generally, you see supply ramp up in March, then in April, sometimes in February, you start seeing it as people try to get ahead of the curve. But most of the inventory, like we tend to hit peak inventory somewhere around July, right before school starts. And then whatever's left kind of dictates pricing for the rest of the year because, if people really need to sell, they start cutting their prices because they're like, crap, school's about to start. We're about to go into the holidays. Cut. And that's often where deals can be had. That's why I like Q3, Q4 for buying. When we launched House Hack, we said, we're starting the company in 22. We're going to buy in Q3, Q4 of 23. And that's exactly what we did. Now, since we've deployed and we've renovated, and now we're doing some ADU developments and buying, where we can develop, which is great. But there is an uncertainty here for a lot of folks who are just trying to get into their first home, given that rates. If what Hawker is saying here is true, and there isn't any kind of recessionary impetus, then it's going to be a while before rates come down. And so the forward guidance there is basically, hey, you're all screwed for longer. And that kind of sucks. Now, that could be good for the stock market because really, for rates to come down more rapidly, you would probably need to see some form of recessionary impetus. And that would be bad for the stock market, but it would be good for the rates market. It would be good for bonds. It would be good for, to some extent, being able to finance at lower rates. what that does in certain markets where there could potentially be more job loss is uncertain. But at this point, I find that the Federal Reserve's guidance, so to bottom line the video, is inflation's going to 2%. We're not worried about it, but we're just going to sit here and twiddle our thumbs until it happens. So good luck. That's sort of the bottom line that I'm getting out of everything that the Fed is doing, which again isn't great because it means that the Federal Reserve is backing away from giving us any guidance on, their take on the potential. Like they're telling us what's going on now. Oh yeah, the economy's good now. Job market seems good and stable now. Great. But what are your internal projections saying for the potential for that to evolve? They used to give us that, and they're not anymore. So I think it's an interesting shift. Keep in mind when it comes to the debt, I know there's a lot of social discussion around how unsustainable the debt is. Keep in mind that debt can actually be extremely sustainable if, and I'm not a shill for more government spending, but debt can be extremely sustainable if the economy is growing very well. See, as long as we are increasing or we are increasingly seeing productivity gains and we are seeing an expansive economy, you could actually expand away from the value of that debt. Now, it'd be nice if the debt stopped growing so we can actually finally outpace the value where it currently sits. If you're $30 trillion in debt, it would be nice to have the economy grow to, say, $50 trillion, and you basically leave that debt in the dust over time as the economy then grows to $100 trillion, and hopefully that debt stays stable. So keeping that debt from growing exponentially is very important. And so far, the debt is still growing and still expanding, which is problematic. Even under the Trump administration, we're still sort of growing at that pace that we had been growing at in prior years. And that's not a diss on Trump. I mean, he just took office, 3 weeks ago. It's just to say, the debt's still growing. So we got some work to do. Anyway, we'll see how it goes. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you all in the next one, folks. Goodbye. Good luck out there. And keep this in mind when you're reading or hearing anything about the Federal Reserve. It's going to be a whole lot of sitting back in their chairs and twiddling their thumbs. Goodbye. Good luck. From the CEO of House Hack and the daddy of 7 kids. Goodbye, Daddy.